So, once upon a time, back in the age-old time of actual response videos, there was a trend, and it was the 10 questions atheists can't answer trend. Twend? Okay, let's get to the point where I can actually speak properly. But this trend was one of the cycles that fed early atheist content. There would be a 10 questions atheists can't answer, or 5 questions atheists can't answer, or 3 questions atheists can't answer, and then everybody would give responses to it, and then the cycle would go back and forth. And it was a self-feeding cycle because the way YouTube used to work back in those days is when you did a response video, you actually could show up below somebody's video so you could follow the chain of responses. This video format has basically died out as Christian YouTube has moved over to mostly internal apologetics, and atheist YouTube has had to rely on most of this content as well. It means that it still happens, right? We still get this kind of content, but this particular cycle hasn't been as much of a prominent thing in recent years, mostly because of the lack of that response feature. But sometimes we are gifted with one of these. So we are going to look at this here in just a second. But first, let's take a look at the fan art section, and the first one we have here is from the Robotic Kitty, a sketch for I Am Taking a Break. We have me and Saki drinking milkshakes while Blizzy is playing with Lord Dumpy, and it looks like, I think this is Robotic Kitty's character as well in the background, with Catboy Soft Serve being served by, I'm guessing, Male Holshan, and Dryer-kun blushing in the background, with Timer-kun blushing as well. Oh god, I've spent so much time in Subathon. The next one we have here is from SiffyX Gameplays, and it is a blinking animation. And the last one we have here is from Lore. There is no information given other than a very, very sleepy slime Neko Suris. As always, everybody, thank you all for your fan art submissions. If you want your fan art to be shown in a future video, the best way to do so is to drop it into the fan art section of the Discord. With that said, Cinderone, thank you for your points for an hada, you fucking degen. And let's go ahead and get into today's topic after you hit the subscribe button. But let's go ahead and take a listen to what we got here.
Okay, obviously, atheists come in all shapes and sizes, and inevitably, whenever I offer any kind of argument...
Hold on a second. Do you have chanting in the background of your entire video?
...about atheism or against atheism, people will say then allows them to use words like...
Okay, so you stop eventually. You stop eventually, thank God.
A popular form of atheism, especially a kind that I interact with a lot on YouTube and that I see on certain channels, and to invite them to reconsider the logical coherence of their position. And if what I describe doesn't align with your particular form of atheism, then you can be confident that I'm not addressing you, and then therefore there's no need to be defensive. So the particular kind of atheism that I'm addressing in this video is the kind that says that only what can be materially observed and empirically measured is real, and that if you want to assert anything as true, that is the kind of evidence that you need to provide.
Okay. I do have a question. What's unreasonable about that particular... So the Spanish Inquisition held on the back end. What is unreasonable about that position? I may not hold to just purely hard materialism. For instance, I don't think thoughts themselves are their own material things. Ideas are not material things, but they very much exist. I think there are things that can exist that are not technically real. But the question we have to ask ourselves is, what is not understandable about the position of materialism? What is a problem with it? If somebody says, hey, please provide evidence to me of a thing that you are saying, what's unreasonable about that position? I don't think there's much that's unreasonable about that, but let's continue.
And it's on those kinds of grounds that they accuse religious believers of being superstitious for not being able to provide empirical evidence for our religious claims.
I mean, yeah, so here's the thing. If you have a religious claim, like you spoke with a god, then it's very reasonable to have the question that follows that up as, okay, but can you show me that? Can you give me any evidence that was a thing that happened? Because otherwise, I'm going to assume you were speaking with yourself.
So it's this kind of atheist that I address this question to, because I just don't think that they can answer it. I've done a lot of searching myself to see, are there atheists out there? Are there commentators? Are there even scholars who answer this? And I don't seem to be able to find one that is satisfying. The question is slavery wrong?
Yeah, it's wrong. It's wrong. Slavery's wrong. That's easy. There, we did it. We did it. Slavery's wrong, guys. Slavery's wrong. Boom. We did it. We answered the question. We answered the question, guys. We did it. We answered the question. It was that easy. Anyway.
And the reason I ask that question is because virtually all respectable people will frantically trip over themselves to be the first to affirm that, yeah, it's wrong. Slavery is definitely wrong.
Okay.
And I even hear many atheists accuse the Bible of being morally inferior for not going far enough in its condemnations of slavery.
It doesn't go far at all in its condemnations of slavery. The Bible doesn't have condemnations of slavery. Even when the Israelites were having to leave the Pharaoh, the Bible itself didn't expressly say that slavery was wrong. It was that the wrong people were enslaved. I'm sorry, the Bible doesn't just not go far enough in its condemnation of it. It is lacking in condemnation of slavery. Jesus doesn't condemn it, Paul doesn't condemn it, and it's definitely not condemned in the Old Testament, but okay.
But I don't think that the atheist of the variety that I described earlier can answer this question sufficiently.
All right, so let us pretend for a minute that we are pure materialists. He wants to ask the question only to pure materialist atheists for some reason. For some reason? Yeah, So a bit of a warning, guys. I have been spoilered on part of this video. There is a moment I am told will come up in the latter portion of this video that is incredibly screwed up. Just a fair warning, that's a thing that's going to be happening. But Razor said I had to take a call when I went to hear the WoW Classic stuff. He basically said make a bank alt so you can throw all your materials to. Be careful how much money you're spending on skills and weapons, skills that you do not need, and yeah, those are really the big things. Just like use the auction house on your bank alt, make a bank alt. Don't throw all your eggs in the basket of a single character because they probably will die. They probably just will die. It's better to not lose every item on your character and just lose the levels you've put into it. That said, let's continue. Let's continue. And as a pure materialist atheist, okay. So the position we're going to be answering from is from the position that the only things that can exist are those which are material. Those things which exist physically in the world and can be measured or can be sensed with one of our senses. That. For the purpose of materialism, we're going to argue that in this particular framework, thoughts exist as electric synapses and therefore can be measured. We can measure a synapse. Emotions... Anubian, emotions exist within materialism just fine. Emotions are just chemicals. That's just chemicals in your body doing things. You're happy, your body shot dopamine. So we're going to argue that every single thing in the human body gets broken down to either electrical or chemical reactions in the body. And that's it. So isn't that how reality works? Generally speaking, yes. So break the brain and you break the mind? Yeah. Your ideas... So I'm not a pure materialist myself because I believe that an idea, once it has been thought, once it is no longer an electrical synapse that is currently firing, outside of it being a memory, is still a thing nonetheless. Math is still a thing nonetheless. Concepts exist, even if there is no way to measure those concepts as far as we know them. But again, for the purposes of this video, we're going to pretend that I think that it all just boils down to chemicals and only chemicals. So, let's do this. Anubian says, I'd like to ask a debate question, but topic. I mean, you can go ahead and ask it. I'll answer it. Why not?
By that, I don't mean that they don't have answers, just that their answers are illogical and that they expose an inconsistency in the kinds of evidence that they demand of others to account for their beliefs. Because if you're going to logically account for the truth of a statement like slavery is wrong, you have to be able to define the terms of that statement. Slavery is easy enough to define, so I'm not going to spend any time on that. But
Are you? Are you? Because there are people, especially libertarians I've dealt with, who do not agree on the definition of slavery. What? No, define slavery. Please define slavery. That's a thing that we need for this. But let's see if he runs with this. Let's see if we need this definition.
the word wrong is one that I've never heard defined in a way that is consistent with atheism. Because if
Anubian says if emotions are chemical, love is a chemical reaction. Every single thing that happens in your brain and emotionals and happens emotionally breaks down to just chemicals and electrical synapses in your body firing so that you feel certain things. That's it. That doesn't make love any less magical unless somebody pretends it does. But yeah, when you fall in love with somebody, there's nothing abstract about that. That is your body producing a chemical reaction, and that's it. But he says, like, okay, so we need to define wrong. So let's figure out what his definition of wrong is.
If you're going to define something logically, you cannot include the thing that you're trying to define in your definition. That would be circular reasoning and therefore fallacious.
Right, and this is why we did a video earlier. God, I hate that face. But this is why we did a video earlier where when John Lennox tried to say that God proves God exists because God exists. He changed it to Jesus, but Jesus is just God in the Christian mythos, so... Anyway, so we can't use circular reasoning. We can't use a word, or I would imagine even a synonym of a word, right? To define something, right? Probably. Let's see where it goes.
For example, if I asked you, what is a honeybee? And you said, well, it's a bee-like creature that makes honey. I would be fully within my rights to accuse you of failing to answer my question.
No, you wouldn't, because there are multiple types of bees. If you asked what a honeybee is, we would first have to have an understanding of what a bee is. And then we would need to have, if you don't understand what a bee is, then we can ask the question, okay, do you understand what an insect is? Do you understand what a pollinator is? Do you understand what a, we can even go all the way up to, do you understand what a eukaryote is? What? It's a subset, that's okay.
All you said is that a bee is a bee.
No, you didn't. You said a honeybee is a type of bee. A honeybee is a subcategory of bee. Otherwise, it would be bad for me to say a human is a mammal.
And that's obvious enough. But what's also true is that we can't use undefined synonyms in our definitions of a thing either. So if you ask me, what is a cat? And I said, well, a cat is a feline creature that humans have a disordered amount of affection for.
Okay, so let's see here real quick. Feline. See here. Other members of the cat family here real quick. Belonging to or related to the cat family. Wait, hold on. So it's bad for me to use feline as a definition of cat, but in the definition of feline, it is belonging or relating to the cat family. Wait, what? Stop, Suris. If God isn't real, then why do you have to... Hello? right now? Because you made me? Because you made me? Is that what you needed to hear? Ooh, there's no God involved there. There's just an abusive relationship with chat. That's all that is. That's all that is, stuff. But you know, like literally, when you look up the definition of a feline, even Cambridge, belonging to or relating to the cat family. That... Huh? You can't... Maybe Google your definitions. Maybe Google your definitions. So, but that's just university. They don't know real knowledge. Jesus Christ. But if we were to define a cat the way he wants, you know, a small, domestic, carnivorous animal, part of the mammal family, usually has retractable claws. They're widely kept as pets because of their ability to catch mice. They get thousands of pictures put of them on the internet. And there we go. Boom, cat. Anyway, continue.
Well, feline is just a synonym for cat. So all I've said, again, is a cat, which does nothing to define what it is. It just...
I mean, sure it doesn't, except for the fact that definition is what Cambridge uses, but okay.
Keeps us going in circles. And unfortunately, every time I've heard an atheist give an account for morality, which...
That was weird.
In your definition, that would be circular reasoning. I've said, again, is a cat, which does nothing to define what it is. It just keeps us going in circles. And unfortunately, every time I've heard an atheist give an account for morality, which then allows them to use words like right and wrong logically and coherently, this is the exact thing that they do. Like one article I read said that morality is simply whatever prevents suffering and increases well-being. But all they...
That's okay. I'm okay with that definition. Anything that increases well-being and decreases suffering would be moral. What's wrong with that definition?
Done, according to this definition, is made suffering synonymous with evil and well-being synonymous with goodness, never really defining any of them. And
what is moral? That which this doesn't... Wait, what? This doesn't have the problems you said it does. Hold on, try that again.
But all they've done, this is the exact thing that they do. Like one article I read said that morality is simply whatever prevents suffering and increases well-being.
Okay.
But all they've done, according to this definition, is made suffering synonymous with evil and well-being synonymous with goodness.
What's wrong with that? Like, what is wrong with that? Those aren't synonyms for morality. There's nothing wrong with that.
Never really defining any of them. And furthermore, they're not even accurate synonyms. Suffering isn't simply wrong or evil. In fact, I can think of all kinds of instances in which varying degrees of suffering can produce something that is widely considered good, such as like chemotherapy or surgery. Exercise is almost universally recognized as a good thing in the right...
Wait, but hold on. Okay, so, as opposed to his straw man that he's attacking, let's go ahead and note that this is the problem with binary thinking. This has always been the problem with binary thinking. When something is either one thing or another, as opposed to varying degrees of something, you get caught in these logic loops. If you are so simple-minded that a switch can only be on or off in reality, in the real world, then we have an issue. So, if I say, is murder okay? Is murder wrong? Then if you answered yes, I could give you a scenario in which case a person goes and commits a murder because they know that the person that they are murdering is a serial killer and is going to murder a bunch of innocent people as a result. You would still say murder is wrong, but we accept the fact that there are scenarios where you do something that is wrong, that increases suffering, because the net good in the world goes up. The ability for people to thrive increases, while the ability for them to suffer decreases. Chemotherapy, when it works, is an example of you engaging in an amount of suffering to eliminate something that would give you more suffering. You are choosing the lesser of two evils. But the end result is better than if you had chosen the greater of the two. If you think things that are if you only think in binaries, then bad things are bad, good things are good, and you should never do the bad things and only focus on the good ones. And then you just die of cancer. Nakibri asked, why did the subathon goal amount change? Because I asked chat, I did a poll with chat. Should I extend the subathon to cover both my debts and Saki's debts as opposed to just Saki's debts? And most everybody said yes. So there we are. So also, chemo doesn't always work. Oh yeah, chemo doesn't always work. It doesn't always work. That's why I said in the times where it does work, we accept that there is suffering that is being used to lead into thriving. When you engage in only binary thinking, there is only suffering and thriving, not degrees of these things.
Right place and at the right time. But the first time I went running as a way to get back in shape, the experience was so unpleasant for me that I nearly threw up. Self-sacrifice and self-denial seem to me to be traits that most people recognize as being honorable, but almost always introduce a degree of suffering. We have monuments in virtually every city where I live commemorating those who died in the wars of the 20th century. So was it wrong for them to suffer and die for those causes?
So, again, if you are engaging only in binary thinking, again, very, very simplistic thinking, then yes, it is bad for people to suffer at all, even if there is a greater good that can be grabbed from it. But when you break away from binary thinking, and accept the fact that there are degrees to which suffering is literally being used to trade, you are trading some suffering for some good. Now you have to evaluate, is more good happening or more suffering happening? Is the suffering you're putting in worth the good that comes out? Like when I'm done with the subathon, I'm going back to the gym, finally. When I go back to the gym and start working out every day again, yeah, there's going to be suffering. But the good that comes out of it is my ankles aren't going to hurt as much. I'm going to be able to breathe easier. My stamina is going to be increased. I'm probably going to be able to do better in bed. Who knows what all kinds of things can come from it. But the end result is there will be positives that come as a trading of the suffering that you put in. There's only a problem if you have to strawman your opponent into only being a binary thinker.
So it seems that not only is morality and right and wrong not defined by that definition, the synonyms that they attempt to smuggle in as substitutes for the terms that they are trying...
Nobody smuggled anything in. You're strawmanning the smuggling. You're strawmanning the smuggling here.
Trying to define in a circular way aren't even good synonyms. Many others have tried to argue that morality is simply what has been agreed upon as a social contract, which can accumulate into something like a legal system or the law. But this begs for a definition of the social contract or the law. If you reply that the social contract is an...
How does it beg for a definition of the law? There's no begging there. If we have agreed upon something and the legal system recognizes something as having been agreed upon by the populace or the legislatures, then something is the law then. Like, there's no question begging there. There's no question begging there.
An agreement about what is right and wrong, then all you've done is made the social contract or the law synonymous with morality. And again, you're back to arguing in circles.
So I would actually agree with this one, though. Something being legal does not make it good. something being illegal does not make it bad. For instance, can we agree that stealing is wrong? Sure, but can we agree that if your family needs medicine and you steal from a drugstore and you save your family's life, how much suffering have you caused? Depending on how you went about the thievery, probably not all that much. How much suffering have you prevented? Probably quite a bit. Again, we have to look at these things not as binaries, but as degrees. Less like switches and more like knobs. To be gay, do crimes. So I do agree that something being legal or agreed upon does not make it good or bad. But let's go.
If I ask you what is morality, and you say that it's the social contract about what is right and wrong, or the law, and I follow up by asking, okay, can you define what the law is? And you say it's a series of documented statements about what is right and wrong. Do you not see how we're just going in circles without ever defining any of the things that we're talking about?
Oh, wait, no, that's not going in circles though. What is moral within this framework, what is moral is what we've agreed on, and what is the law is what's been written down. That's not a circle. That's just a different type of thing. The law is when it's written down and accepted, whereas whether it's moral or not is when we generally accept it as right. And these two things can be different. They often actually contradict each other. Often we can accept that certain things are moral, but the law doesn't permit them. Or we can admit that certain things are immoral, but the law permits them. If that didn't happen literally in reality, maybe I could agree that these are different things, but they're not.
Furthermore, it fails to account how we can judge one instance of a social contract or a legal system against another. How?
Yes, actually we can. So again, this is what getting away from binary thinking helps you with. If you agree with both statements simultaneously, that laws are the moral things that we've agreed upon that have been written down, and that there are moral things that we can agree on that are not written down, therefore not laws, therefore might come in contradiction with laws. If we can agree with that set of statements and agree with things are moral when they increase thriving for humanity and decrease suffering. If we can agree on these two things simultaneously as opposed to in their own vacuum chambers, then we have the ability to judge certain legal systems against certain other legal systems. Because we can look at a legal system and go, yes, you guys agreed on certain things, and you even codified certain things into law, but the net result of the things you codified is causing suffering, therefore your law is immoral. We can do those comparisons when instead of looking at these two ways of thinking of morality in their own vacuum chambers, you combine them together. Again, this is what happens when you have nuanced thinking as opposed to binary thinking. What a concept! Clueless Expert, thank you for the 100 bits. I think the fallacy here is that the definition is pointing to something external to the definition, the actual text of the law in this case. But he won't accept that. He's only willing to consider the definitions. Said, the fake Baron Zia says, Suris, doesn't the Bible say that it's moral to stone your children if they disobey you? Yes. Yes, it does.
How can we say that the legal system that allows slavery are bad and the legal systems that prevent it are good?
Because the legal systems that allow slavery increase net suffering for humanity, and the legal systems that prevent slavery increase the net thriving for humanity. Those are things we can do, dude. Again, that's a thing we can do when we look at the whole scope of morality instead of each of these individual holes you tried to poke.
Unless morality somehow sits outside and above legal systems and social contracts.
It doesn't even need to be that. It doesn't even need to do that, my guy. You asserted that. Now that you've asserted that, please bring some evidence for it.
Because that's the question that's being asked here. Is slavery wrong? Are systems that allow slavery wrong? I'm not asking, do some people create legal systems that outlaw it? Obviously, that's a question that doesn't need to be asked. The question is, ought it to be against the law for the sake of what is morally good? So again,
yes, it should, as we've defined already.
Not only is the social contract theory fallacious for using circular reasoning, It doesn't even use a well thought out substitute for morality. And the reason we always end up with these absurdities is because morality can't be accounted for empirically without obscuring it behind some poorly assessed substitute.
But we can account for morality empirically. We actually can. It's very simple. We have survey data. I'm dead fucking serious. We have survey data for this. We can literally survey a local populace to see what they agree with and see how their lives have been affected. If we think that abortion ought to be outlawed, we then look at that population and we go, okay, how many times have abortions had to happen for this population? What kind of education has this population had that led to these outcomes? How dangerous have these abortions been how dangerous has it been for these abortions to happen? What have been the social ramifications for allowing these things? These are all measurable things we can look at. These are all data. These are all statistics we get to look at as people, which is really, really helpful. And from all of that net data, we can come to a conclusion, okay, should we allow or shouldn't we allow abortion? Now that we've looked at the way the people who have abortions are affected, the way the local populace is affected, the way people's social standing is affected, the way the doctors are affected, the way that the insurance companies that have to provide these things are affected, we get to measure all of that to come to a conclusion. The conclusion is abortion's fine. But if you pretend that all of these ways in which we can measure human suffering and even human inconvenience somehow don't exist, then sure, you might be able to come to the conclusion that, well, we can't measure any of this. None of it's empirical, but it is. Human suffering is something that can be empirically measured. It's not easy to do. It's not the easiest thing in the world at all. We rely on a lot of human beings being honest about their suffering, about how things have affected them. It takes a lot of doing, but trust me, it is something we can measure. If you don't think we can measure human suffering at all, then ask yourself, how much have you suffered in the last 14 days? Do you know why these things have happened? Do you not know why? Does not knowing why increase your own suffering? On a scale of 1 to 10, how do you feel? Are you in the normal amount of pain? Have you accepted that the normal amount of pain is 0 pain, and so your threshold is actually bonkers? These are all basic things. These are all basic things we get to do as people. But anyway, let's continue.
Which is by definition circular reasoning, and which always offers a substitute that falls absurdly short of whatever it is that we mean by morality. So an atheist can't actually say that anything by that measure is right or wrong and truly mean what they're saying without sacrificing their own logical consistency. And don't misunderstand what I'm saying here. I'm not saying that an atheist can't be moral or that they don't have a moral conscience. What I am saying is that they can't account for that morality logically. For them, it's something like social conditioning or just feelings about something. But what
I was socially conditioned to believe that gay and trans people are wrong. They're bad and evil and stupid and are going to hell. And yet I'm now dating a trans person. Okay, cool. I guess, man, weird. I guess it's just social conditioning, though.
Whatever it is, it's not rational. Now, at this point, it might be fair to demand of me the thing that I've been asking atheists for, which is, what's my definition of morality? So morality is a standard of truth that gives us the ability to apprehend potential alternative thoughts, actions, and scenarios, and to make judgments about them that express either approval or disapproval when compared to that standard. Such judgments appear in statements like, that ought to happen, and that ought not to happen, or more precisely, that ought to be, and that ought not to be.
All he did was just define the word normative. This is just the definition for the word normative. But okay.
In other words, we are making judgments of an ontological and metaphysical nature, which are inquiries about being and existence.
No, we're not making any arguments that are metaphysical. Literally, we can make these arguments entirely physically, entirely empirically. If you use human suffering as your measurement device, these things are actually really easy to figure out. But let's go ahead and pretend that they're not for sake of continuing the video, because I know things get worse.
These aren't questions about what does happen, they're questions about what ought to happen, because what ought to happen doesn't always happen. For example, slavery happens and is happening right now in the world around us. And
it's happening in the United States. It's the 13th Amendment. We still do slavery.
if we say that's wrong, we're saying it ought not to happen. But if we only take our moral understanding from that which can be observed and measured empirically, then there is no question of what ought to be, only what is, because only what is what can be measured and inquired about in this way.
Are humans suffering under slavery? That is an is. From the is that they are suffering under slavery, we can determine that they ought not be enslaved. That was easy.
Which is why the physical sciences can't tell us that slavery is wrong. They can only tell us that it is, it exists, it has being.
You're literally incorrect. We can measure human suffering, my guy.
But if you're saying it ought not to exist, then you're appealing to some invisible standard that can't be measured empirically, that is used to judge
How much pain are you in today? That can be measured.
potentials like slavery or not slavery, and saying that one should be willed and that the other should be opposed. One of those potentials, that is not slavery, should be instantiated by our will, and the other should be left on the shelf of mere potentials. And to make such statements, you have to offer evidence of a metaphysical and a theological nature, because there is no physical evidence available to you. Which is why it's no wonder that slavery, which virtually disappeared in Christendom in the Middle Ages, started to resurge in Western civilization at exactly the time when secularism started to gain momentum and influence.
Are we going to pretend for a minute that most of the nations that did the slavery thing were not primarily Christian nations? Are we going to pretend that for now? Is that a thing we're going to pretend? Are we going to pretend that the American history of slavery did not include a billion apologetics based in the Bible about how slavery is an okay thing to do? What?
That is the modern era. The slave trade that we tend to think of and universally condemn really only got going during the scientific, secular, and Enlightenment era.
Man, I guess slavery never happened in biblical times. God, isn't it so great that the Jews never had to leave Egypt because they weren't enslaved? Isn't it so great that we don't have to worry about the ways in which Jewish people were allowed to steal slaves from other nations around them? Because the Bible has an entire guide for how to do that. Isn't it great that none of that was needed? Because slavery is so unique to modern times and secularism.
In the ancient world, slavery abounded everywhere. The Roman Empire was built on the backs of slaves. And then in the Middle Ages, it went into severe decline. And in certain places where Christianity was dominant and the church was most influential, it virtually disappeared.
Somehow, I don't think that's accurate. Let's see here. Slavery began to become a dying institution in the 18th century. Wow. That's not in line with what he said. Let's see here. Slavery never completely disappeared from ancient Roman society. Its position in the Roman economy shifted as beginning of the late antiquity period. The slave system of the Roman world adjusted to a new category of labor. So that didn't disappear then either. That's weird. It's almost like slavery was a pretty common thing still, even in the places you mentioned. But okay. And yeah, no, when we talk about the decline, it's because in Rome, they adjusted to calling things closer to indentured servitude. They started to change the definitions of what a slave was, but mechanically people were still enslaved.
But then for some reason, around the time of humanism, and then the Renaissance, and then the Enlightenment, it came back. It was exactly at this time when we stopped measuring the human soul as an essential ingredient in a person's humanity and reduced that inquiry about what a human being is to only what can be physically measured, only what the sciences can tell us. And when they did that, they found that human beings are far from being equal. Some are bigger, some are stronger, some are smarter, some are more beautiful, some are more agreeable and more capable than others. Combine this with theories about natural selection and survival of the fittest, and you have the perfect...
Oh boy, you just strawmanned what survival of the fittest means. You just did this whole, aha, Darwin did a racism, therefore humans bad, therefore evolution bad, therefore things that are objectively true and measurable are bad. Also, my guy, you understand that human beings still should be treated equally, even if some are stronger or smarter or what have you. We had this whole... This is the part that I got spoilered on. This whole, well, actually, people... we find that people... What's the best way to put this? What's the best way to put this that makes it not sound awful? What's the best way to put this to where I'm not strawmanning the same way he's been strawmanning secularism and atheism? You don't talk about racially segregated slavery and then talk about people being biologically better than others within a couple sentences of one another without it sounding like an apologetic for something else.
Recipe to say some people should dominate others and some people should be utterly subservient to others. It is only when we account for the human soul, a thing more precious...
We don't need the human soul to account for why human beings shouldn't be enslaved. We don't need the human soul for that. It's as simple as, what must one do to deserve to be enslaved? What must a person do? And if you can't answer that, then you can't really come to a conclusion about whether you should enslave people, and you're left with the default of not fucking enslaving people. If you can't come up with a reason why people should be enslaved, then the institution of slavery ought not be. We find that economically, nations who do not utilize slavery for their labor forces perform better. We find that morally, or not, we don't need morality for this one. We find that on an index of human happiness, people are happier when slavery is not a thing in their country, when people are not worried about the threat of slavery, when that anxiety is not there. My God, none of those statistics required the human soul. Weird, that.
In the entire known universe, that we can then say that all men are equal, for they all carry the dignity of the divine image imprinted on that soul.
Man, I wish that the Christians who owned plantations in America and used the Bible to argue for slavery, and even the Bible that argues for slavery and multiple points in the Bible, used these arguments that we would have never had slaves in the American South then if America had not been so predominantly Christian, and the Christians argued that the slave trade was good actually because God. They literally, yeah, Razor, you're right, they literally created a slave Bible for them. And we're done here. We're done here. When you fall into this, well, some people are just better than others, and that's why science can't say that slavery is bad, so I guess under secularism, slavery would just be an okay thing to do. No. No. You don't need Christianity to give people worth. You don't even need religion to give people worth. People can have worth by just being people, and that's an A-okay thing to do, and it's an A-okay thing to think, and it's perfectly okay to run that by as an axiom. But go ahead and let me know what y'all think, because I'm looking at the comments. Not only does the Bible not condemn slavery, it actually condones it. The Bible doesn't condemn slavery. It explicitly gives construction on how to procure slaves. I wanted to comment on this video when it came out, but I was at work, so better late than never. Brian proposes that he ask a random atheist if slavery is wrong. The atheist in this scenario naturally responds yes. That should be the end of the discussion, but Brian suggested he'll ask his interlocutor to define the word wrong. If I'm the random atheist in this scenario, I'll simply respond, you brought it up. What do you think wrong means? Jesus. When believers can establish that they actually have an objective morality that exists, I'll take this question seriously. In reality, all you need is belief in an objective moral authority to get the exact same results. True. Any objective moral authority that you believe in, anyone at all, will work as a stand-in for this. Anyone at all. You don't need supernaturalism. You don't need theism. You don't need any of this. None of this is to say it's wrong to be a theist or believe in a god or anything like that. None of that. What we are saying is stop pretending that we have to think like you, that we have to be Christians, that we have to act this way, else we can't make sense of reality. Atheists can make sense of reality just fine. Besides, you have to pretend that you aren't engaging in your own levels of cognitive dissonance yourself. And that's its own existential nightmare to consider. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you haven't already. And as always, everyone, insert end of video tagline here.